Hello and welcome to the latest edition of News for English Learners. As usual on this channel, we're going to be delving into a news article and reviewing some of the interesting words and phrases that we come across. Hopefully, I'll be able to help you to understand them better and incorporate them into your passive vocabulary, and thereby in the future, if you use them in conversation, you'll be able to become more fluent. Don't forget to check out some of my other long videos, which are available on my YouTube channel, along with over 100 one-minute short videos about words and phrases that have been taken both from the articles and others that are not contained in the articles. So don't forget, check those out. And if you like this content, please click like, and if you want future updates, of course, subscribe to the channel. So, without any further delay, let's begin with the first paragraph. In a surprising turn of events, the Metals Company, a deep-sea mining firm, has put its foot down and demanded that Greenpeace be kicked out from United Nations discussions. The company alleges that Greenpeace has been getting in the way of its research expedition in the remote Pacific. The Metals Company has accused Greenpeace of being anti-science. Greenpeace, on the other hand, argues that the incident in question was a peaceful protest aimed at protecting a pristine ecosystem. This is the latest development in a tug-of-war over access to a treasure trove of metals worth hundreds of billions of dollars located on the seabed in certain parts of the deep ocean. So let's begin by looking at the first phrase we have highlighted in yellow. This is the idiomatic expression to put your foot down. Now, like all idioms, it's not to be taken literally. I mean, literally, if you put your foot down, that is called stamping. If you put your foot down with force, you stamp on the ground. But in this context, it is used idiomatically, and it's indicative of somebody asserting their authority. So let's look at a few examples that might illustrate that better. Imagine that you are a parent and your children are constantly rebelling against your rules. Perhaps they want to stay up late past their usual bedtime to watch TV or play games, and you've decided enough is enough. It's time to assert your authority and make them follow the rules. So you put your foot down and make them go to bed. In another context, perhaps the boss, who obviously has the authority, has been a little bit lax in enforcing the rules at work. Perhaps people start arriving late, or they start eating in the office, and the boss decides he's going to put his foot down and stop all of that. So he's going to enforce the rules strictly and make sure that people follow his instructions. So in both of those contexts, you can see that to put your foot down is basically a question of enforcing rules that perhaps already exist, but maybe are not being followed consistently. So in this case, it's the metals company that has decided to put its foot down and has demanded that Greenpeace, that environmental organization, be kicked out from the United Nations discussions. So that brings us on to the second word highlighted here. And this is a separable phrasal verb. So like all separable phrasal verb, you can put the name between the verb and the particle. So you can kick Peter out, or you can kick out Peter. However, if you use a pronoun, don't forget it must go in the middle position. So kick him out, kick her out, kick them out, etc. Now, what does it mean? Well, if we look at the verb to kick, well, this is a verb that indicates you're hitting something with your foot or your leg. So if you've ever played football or soccer, as it's called in the US, you'll know that the means by which you move the ball around the pitch is by kicking. You hit it with your foot. If you've ever practiced certain forms of martial arts, like karate, for example, you'll know that kicking your opponent is one of the principal forms of defending yourself or attacking. So that's the basic meaning of this verb. But if we look at it as a phrasal verb, then the meaning, of course, changes quite a lot. If you kick somebody out, that means that you are ejecting them or expelling them from some form of organization or from perhaps from a physical place. To look at a couple of examples, if you behave badly in a nightclub, you might be kicked out or ejected by the bouncer or the door person. If you break the rules in some kind of organization or club, the other members might decide to kick you out, to eject you, to cancel your membership. If you've ever played any online computer games and you have been found cheating, then you will probably be kicked out of the server. So in all of those cases, you can see that it's indicative of somebody being removed forcefully from a place, a physical place, or ejected from an organization. In this case, the metals company, this deep sea mining firm, is demanding that Greenpeace be ejected or kicked out from the United Nations discussions because it alleges that Greenpeace has been getting in the way of its research expedition. So the next phrase we have here, to get in the way, this basically is used in situations when something is interfering or obstructing with a process and making it difficult for it to happen or to be appreciated properly. So we can illustrate this by thinking of occasions when you are trying to take a photograph. So maybe you're taking a photograph of another member of your family in a busy area where there are lots of people walking past. This could actually make it difficult to take a good photo because the people walking past keep getting in the way. They keep obstructing your view. So that's a physical example when somebody can get in the way. However, it can also be used in other contexts where we're not talking of a physical obstruction, but it could be that something has happened and it's making it more difficult to proceed. So, for example, if you are trying to concentrate or to study and your neighbor is constantly making noise, that could get in the way of you finishing your studies. It's disrupting that process or making it difficult to happen. Perhaps you're on holiday and you're trying to relax and take it easy, but your boss is constantly calling you or sending you messages. So that gets in the way of your enjoyment. It stops you appreciating your holiday. So hopefully you could see that in those examples, there's some kind of physical obstruction or something that is preventing something from happening. And in this particular context in the article, the metals company alleges or accuses Greenpeace of physically obstructing its research expedition or of preventing it from carrying out its research. I think we can see in the picture here the kind of protest that we're talking about. They are obstructing with a boat and protesting and trying to stop the company from carrying out its research. So the next phrase we have here is tug of war. As it says, this is the latest development in a tug of war. So let's start with the verb. Tug is a regular verb, and it's very similar to the other English regular verb to pull. If you are tugging something, you're pulling something, usually quite forcefully and perhaps repeatedly. So think of a child that is trying to attract its mother's attention, or its father's attention for that matter. Quite often they are tugging on the hand in order to get that attention that they demand. They're pulling insistently over and over again. Perhaps the door of your apartment is stuck. You can't open it. So you tug on it forcefully in order to try to open it. There is actually also a kind of boat which is called a tugboat. And you see these boats very often in and around ports or harbors. And they are relatively small, but very powerful, with very powerful engines that can pull or push very large ships, container ships, or the like. So that's why they're called tugboats, because they are used for pulling larger vessels. So in this case, the expression tug of war is used figuratively. But a tug of war is actually also a physical action. It's actually a kind of game or sport that people sometimes play in groups and consists of two groups of people pulling at opposite ends of a large rope. And whoever tugs or pulls the hardest wins. It's a very simple game. And in this case, that metaphor is used to describe this kind of battle that is taking place within the UN in these discussions where there's a big disagreement over whether this kind of deep sea mining should go ahead or not. That's why the metaphor is used, because the two sides are pulling against each other. They're disagreeing and fighting this metaphorical tug of war. So let's move on to the next word. Treasure trove. Let's look at the second word in this phrase. This is the more interesting word, and it's usually used in English when we talk about things that are valuable or precious or useful in some way. And it's used to talk about a collection of such things or a cache of them. So we could perhaps talk about a museum being a trove of useful or interesting historical information. Perhaps you are sorting through your old possessions in the attic and you discover a trove of photographs that you had completely forgotten about. So it's not necessarily something that is of monetary value. It could be something useful or precious in some other way. However, in this particular context, we are talking about money. That's why it's combined with the word treasure. Treasure usually signifies things of great monetary value. For example, if we talk of pirates, we often discuss them in the context of treasure because that's what they were after. That's what they were looking for. They would attack ships, they would steal all the valuable gold and jewels and put them in a big chest. Hence, in this case, we use the word treasure because these metals that can be found on the floor of the deep sea, the deep oceans, are extremely valuable. So, hence, they are described in the article as a treasure trove that is potentially worth hundreds of billions of dollars. So, let's move on to the next paragraph. The metals company and other mining firms argue that the minerals contained in potato-sized lumps, known as polymetallic nodules, are crucial for batteries. The International Energy Agency predicts that the demand for these metals will soar as the world continues to transition towards a low carbon economy. The proponents of deep sea mining argue that the large quantities of metals needed for green technologies like wind turbines, solar panels, and devices such as mobile phones can be obtained from the ocean's resources. The metals company emphasizes the reduced environmental impact of deep sea mining and cites research indicating that the seafloor has significantly less biodiversity and stores less carbon than terrestrial environments. In this paragraph, the first word we come across is the noun lump. And a lump in English refers to any piece of material or matter that has a generally irregular shape. If we look at the picture here, we can actually see one of the lumps that we are talking about. In the article, it says it's approximately the size of a potato, so not particularly large, but these lumps are extremely valuable because they have a lot of valuable minerals inside them. We can also talk about a lump on your body. If you have a swelling or a protuberance, for example, maybe you've been hit on the head by a hard object, then usually that part of your body would swell up, it would get bigger, and we would talk about you having a lump on your head. It's also possible to use this to talk about many other kinds of materials. You can pick up a lump of clay and mold it into a different shape. You could pick up a lump of dough and knead it if you're making bread. You could also pick up a lump of sand when you're on the beach and build a sandcastle. So you can use it in a wide variety of different ways to talk about different materials, but it's always a piece of something. Or, if you're talking about the body, a swelling or protuberance. So the next word we have is the adjective crucial. This is often used in English to describe situations or objects that are very important, perhaps even essential. Maybe they're important because of the way they affect other things or the way they might change certain outcomes. You can talk about crucial decision making. Maybe you reach a moment in your life where you have to make a crucial decision for your future. Perhaps you could talk about what you are going to study at university, or whether or not you accept a particular job offer. That could be crucial for your future career. We can also talk about crucial events in human history. Some moment in human history that was particularly important for the development of civilization. You could argue, for example, that when humans were able to create and manage fire, that was a crucial discovery or a crucial step in human development, because it really was the first step on the road to the development of technology. We can also talk about crucial components in a machine. Okay, there are certain components that are absolutely necessary in order for the machine to work. And in this case, that is actually what we're talking about. We are talking about these metals that are contained in the nodules, in the lumps, that are crucial for the manufacturing of batteries. You cannot make modern batteries without those components. That's why they are crucial. The next word in this paragraph is the verb to soar. This is a regular verb, and when we use this, we are usually talking about things rising rapidly or flying to a great height. We can talk about birds soaring in the air, particularly large birds. They often open their wings and they ride on rapidly rising columns of air, and they can soar to great heights. Equally, we could also talk about a rocket soaring into the air as it takes off. Sometimes you'll hear people dramatically talking about mountains soaring above the surrounding landscape. And we can often use it figuratively to talk about things like prices. If prices are rising rapidly, as indeed they have been doing recently in many parts of the world due to high inflation rates, then we can talk of soaring prices. In this case, we are talking about a different economic aspect, that is, the demand for these valuable metals. And it is predicted or forecast that the demand for these metals will soar, it will increase very quickly and very dramatically, basically driven by the transition of the world economy to a low carbon economy. So the next word we have here is proponents. This is a noun that refers to people or groups of people who make proposals for a course of action. They perhaps support or advocate a particular policy. Um, a good example could be in the US, where there's deep divisions about gun control, right? There are proponents who would favor increasing controls on gun ownership, and equally, there are other proponents on the other side who would propose or support relaxing laws about gun control. So there's no agreement on policy there. And equally, in the realm of environmental policy, there is often a lot of disagreement on the course of action that should be taken. As in this case, there are proponents of deep sea mining who argue that this is the way in which we can satisfy our demand for these valuable metals that are crucial for making batteries. Whereas there are other proponents who disagree and they say we should keep these environments in a pristine state without interfering or mining them. So it remains to be seen which of the two arguments will win out. Moving on to the penultimate word, we have this verb. It's a regular verb. It is pronounced emphasize, and the adjective form is emphatic. If you emphasize something, it basically means that you are giving it prominence, you are stressing its importance. A good example could be if you're writing a text and you want to emphasize a particular word or phrase, then you might write it in bold, or you might change the color, as indeed I have done here in this text. If you are speaking, you can also emphasize words or phrases, perhaps just by moderating your tone of voice or using particular words in order to highlight a particular concept. In this case, we are talking about this company, the metals company, which is highlighting or emphasizing the fact that it believes deep sea mining is less harmful to the environment than traditional terrestrial mining. So it's highlighting that, it's emphasizing it. So the last word we have here in this paragraph is the word sight. That's spelt with a C, of course. This is a homophone. It can be spelt with S, but that is a completely different word. This word is used when we are referring to other information, or to quote somebody, or perhaps mention some kind of evidence that supports our argument. For example, if you are writing an academic paper, it's very important to cite all of your sources. Usually, this is done at the back of the paper. All of those sources which are used to support your arguments have to be referenced so that other people can see them. Perhaps we also could see this in the court of law if a lawyer cites a previous ruling in order to support their argument in a legal case. In this particular case, in this article, the metals company is citing research. So it's quoting or referencing research that has been carried out which supports its argument that deep sea mining has a relatively low impact on the environment. Because, as the research has indicated, there is less biodiversity and the deep sea stores less carbon than terrestrial environments. So that's why it is referencing this research, because it supports its argument. So moving on to the final paragraph. However, despite the potential benefits, deep sea mining poses a significant threat to the delicate ecosystem in the deep sea. Studies have shown that mining below 200 meters can bring about harmful noise, vibration, sediment plumes, and light pollution, leading to a fall in biodiversity. The fate of Greenpeace will be decided at an International Seabed Authority meeting this week. These latest international talks continue an ongoing effort to decide what rules should apply to companies that want to collect minerals from the abyssal plain, one of the deepest parts of the ocean. The ISA has said it aims to have rules in place by 2025. So the first word we have in this paragraph is the adjective delicate. Delicate refers to things that are very fine. Perhaps they are constructed in such a way that they are easily broken or damaged. Perhaps they are quite weak and need to be handled with care. Delicate can also sometimes be used to refer to something that is subtle and difficult to perceive. If we think of an expensive china vase, for example, that could be considered delicate because if you handle it roughly or you drop it or knock it, it's going to break. It's very fragile. If you talk about a delicate flavor of some food, then that means it's not strong. It's perhaps difficult to detect. In this case, we're talking about a delicate ecosystem in the deep sea. So that means that the ecosystem is easily disrupted or destroyed. And that is one of the arguments against mining the deep sea, because people think that this kind of pristine environment should be left alone. It should not be disturbed. However, the economic motive is there, and we'll see which argument wins out. So, next we come to yet another phrasal verb here, to bring about. This is separable, so you can say to bring something about. Essentially, this means to cause something to happen or to make something occur. And it's often used to describe changes or events or situations that are the result of specific policies or actions. So we can, for example, talk about the new government policy bringing about a reduction in smoking, right? If they've made smoking more expensive, or perhaps they prohibited it in certain situations, that might bring about a reduction in the number of people who actually smoke. Equally, we can also talk about the invention of something bringing about a revolution or a change in society. I mean, a recent, very significant development in technology is, of course, the internet. That has brought about massive changes in the way people can communicate and relate to each other, the way they work, etc. Now, in this case, what it is talking about is the research studies that have demonstrated that mining can actually cause or bring about harmful effects. So that is one of the arguments against mining in the deep sea. The next word or phrase, I should say, that we have is sediment plumes. So a plume has a couple of different meanings, but the one we're going to focus on here is connected usually with smoke or water. If we talk about a plume of smoke, then this is a large column of smoke that's rising up into the air. It's typical when there's a fire in a building or something like that, or if there's an explosion. We can also, as I mentioned, use it to describe a plume of water. If there is a burst pipe in the street, that can send a plume of water high into the air because of the high pressure. In this case, we're talking about sediment plumes. Now, sediment is essentially a lot of material that is accumulated over the years, usually at the bottom of a body of water, like a lake or a river, or in this case, the ocean. And this fine grained material, when it's disturbed, can cause or can form plumes, a little bit like smoke plumes on land. And they can, of course, cause problems. If if the sediments are disturbed and plumes are formed, this can reduce visibility and I suppose can affect the animals that are living in that environment. That's why it could be a problem. So the penultimate word we have in this final paragraph is the noun fate. And this was traditionally used to refer to a kind of power that would determine your destiny. It was impossible to avoid your fate. In the modern usage, we use it in a subtly different way, but it's usually used to refer to the outcome of some kind of process or event. In this case, it's the fate of Greenpeace that we're talking about. So we are referring to what will ultimately happen to them. And it will, of course, be decided by the meeting of the ISA this week. So we'll wait and see what happens to them. So that brings us to the final phrase, which is abyssal plain. The second word, plane, can be spelled Plane, and that is most commonly used to refer to an aeroplane. It's kind of abbreviation for that. This plane, Plain, is used in a couple of important ways. One can mean to be easy to understand without great complexity, or also without decoration. And in this case, it's actually used to refer to a large flat area which is in the deep ocean, which is called the abyssal plain. The abyss is a word that is usually used to refer to very deep areas of the deep ocean or deep sea. So this is a very large, extensive area, very flat area in the middle of the ocean, the deep ocean, and it covers a vast area. I mean, there is one which is called the Somme Abyssal Plain, which is in the North Atlantic, and it covers an area of approximately 900,000 square kilometers. So we are talking about an enormous area. So in this article, it is referring to those areas where these minerals are often found. And it is, as it says, one of the deepest parts of the ocean, which makes collecting the nodules quite complicated. And I'm guessing that is something that these companies are currently working on. Probably they are trying to define how they're going to extract the minerals or how they're going to collect the nodules. And we'll have to see what happens. So that brings us to the end of today's article. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like, and if you want to be updated about future videos, also you should subscribe. So until next time, I will say goodbye.